Hey Reddit, I've got a story to share that's been eating at me for months. I know it's going to sound insane. It's about family, betrayal, and the crazy things that can happen when someone thinks they're entitled to everything. I'm Sarah. I'm 23, and I used to have a pretty normal life. Or at least I thought I did. Growing up, I was close to my parents, and things were, well, they were okay. Not perfect, but definitely far from dysfunctional. We lived in a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. My parents worked hard, and my older brother, Mark, had always been the golden child. Mark was the kind of kid who excelled at everything. Top of his class, athletic, and had this magnetic charm that made everyone adore him. I never really had that. I wasn't bad or anything. I was just average. It wasn't like we were ever enemies or anything, but there was this quiet, simmering tension. Mark was always the one getting the praise, the attention. I guess that's how I became the invisible one in the family. But that all changed when Mom passed. It was hard on all of us. Dad, of course, was devastated. He didn't really know how to cope with losing his wife, and his health started to deteriorate fast after that. He went from being this strong, proud man to a shadow of himself. I guess it was no surprise when Dad passed away just 6 months after Mom. But even with both of them gone, the one thing I thought would stay constant was our home. It was all we had left. The house was the one place I felt safe. But then things started to change. A few months after Dad's funeral, Mark called me up. We hadn't really talked much since the funerals. I think we were both still in shock. When I picked up, his voice was different, cold, formal, like he was some stranger. "Sarah, I need you to come over to the house. We need to talk about something important," he said. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it was about handling their affairs, maybe closing up some things. But when I arrived, I immediately noticed how different the place felt. Mark was already sitting at the kitchen table, papers scattered in front of him. He had a grim look on his face. "Sit down," he said, without even looking up from the papers. I did. "What's going on, Mark? What's all this?" Mark pushed the papers toward me. "This is about the house and the estate. Mom and Dad's will." I froze. I hadn't even thought about the will yet. It wasn't even on my radar. "Look, I've been going over everything. And I've decided what needs to be done with the house," he said, still not looking up. "Wait, what?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Mark sighed, finally glancing up at me. "The house. It's going to be mine. I'll take care of all the big stuff, and you'll get the smaller things. The heirlooms, a few family keepsakes. Nothing else." I blinked, not believing what I was hearing. "You can't be serious. This house is ours. It belongs to both of us." "No, Sarah," he said, his voice more condescending now. "It belongs to me. Mom and Dad always made it clear that I was the one they expected to take care of things. I'm the one with the responsibilities. You've never really been involved." I sat there, stunned, the weight of his words sinking in. "Are you really going to do this? After everything? After Mom and Dad are gone? You're just going to take everything?" Mark's face hardened. "I'm doing what's right. I'm the one who has the skills, the connections. I'm the one who can manage all of this. You're not built for this, Sarah. You've never been the one to handle things. You should be grateful that I'm letting you stay here for as long as I am." The air between us grew thick with tension. My mouth went dry. "So what? You want me to just leave?" Mark didn't even flinch. "Eventually, yes. I'll give you a few months to figure out your life. But you don't really have a place here anymore." I could feel my hands start to shake. "Mark, you don't get to just take everything. This house is as much mine as it is yours. I'm not leaving. You can't make me leave." "Oh, I can," Mark said, his voice cold and calculating. "And I will. I'm just giving you time to figure it out. But don't get any ideas, Sarah. I'm in charge now." I stood up, my chest tight with anger. "You can't be serious. You think you can just kick me out of my home? After everything that's happened, after Mom and Dad?" "Enough, Sarah," Mark snapped, standing up too. "I'm trying to be generous here, but you're pushing it. You're lucky I'm not taking more." I turned to leave, but not before I threw one last glance over my shoulder. "You'll regret this, Mark." "Whatever," he said, shaking his head. "Just get your stuff together. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I left without saying another word. As I walked out the door, I could feel the weight of everything. The betrayal, the loss, the anger, settling in like a heavy stone in my chest. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I couldn't believe what Mark was doing. He had always been entitled, but this was something else. This was cold, calculated. and I had no idea how far he was willing to go. But I wasn't going to just roll over and let him win. I started making plans. I wasn't going to let Mark get away with this. I began gathering everything I could, documents, evidence, anything that might help me hold my ground. I had no idea what I would do next, but I knew I couldn't just sit back and let him push me out. Then, a week later, things took an even uglier turn. Mark showed up at the house with a few movers, acting like he owned the place. His plan was to start clearing out the house, to pack up everything that he wanted. "Mark, what are you doing?" I demanded, standing in the doorway. He turned to me, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, Sarah. This is my house now." I couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like my whole life was falling apart, and I was powerless to stop it. "You think you're going to get away with this?" I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. Mark smirked. "You're not in a position to stop me. You're just a guest in my house now. Get used to it." The argument with Mark felt like it had just started, but the tension was already unbearable. His smug expression and the way he was throwing his weight around made me want to scream. I couldn't stand how he was acting, like everything Mom and Dad worked for was just his to take. I felt completely powerless, like I was being suffocated by his entitled attitude. "Mark, you can't just come in here and do this. You don't even know what you're doing," I shouted, pacing back and forth in the hallway. He rolled his eyes and started grabbing more of my things, tossing them in boxes like they were meaningless. "I'm just doing what needs to be done. I don't know why you're making such a fuss. You should be thankful I'm even letting you stay here. You don't get to tell me what to do. This house is as much mine as it is yours." I snapped, clenching my fists. The anger boiling inside me was starting to cloud my thoughts. Mark's face hardened, and he took a step toward me, almost like he was ready to physically shove me out of the way. "You're not in charge here." "I am. I'm trying to be generous, but you're making it difficult." I stepped back, not wanting to escalate things further, but my heart was racing. Every word out of his mouth felt like a slap to my face. I couldn't believe he was acting like this, as if I had no right to anything my parents had worked for, as if I didn't matter. With my heart pounding in my chest, I spun around and headed for the stairs, needing some space to think. I couldn't stay in the same room as him any longer without losing it. I was about to lose control. I made my way up to the second floor, avoiding the movers who were still rummaging through the rooms, taking things that weren't theirs to take. I needed to get away, to cool off, to just breathe. The door to my parents' room stood ajar, and I hesitated for a moment. This room hadn't been touched since they passed away. It felt sacred, but I was desperate to escape Mark's presence and needed some solitude. So I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was just as it had been when Mom and Dad were alive. Quiet, serene, like nothing had changed. Their bed still had the same comforter, and their dresser had the same framed photos on it. It was almost like they were still there, but I couldn't stand being surrounded by memories anymore. I walked to the window, staring outside at the garden below, trying to gather my thoughts. I had to figure out what to do next, because I wasn't about to let Mark win. I needed a plan, something that would give me leverage. Then, my eyes caught a glimpse of something sticking out from under the drawer of the nightstand next to Mom's side of the bed. Curiosity got the best of me, and I pulled the drawer open, expecting it to be a piece of old paperwork or maybe one of Mom's keepsakes. But instead, there was an envelope, sealed, with my parents' names written on it in bold, messy handwriting. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had never seen this envelope before. What could it be? Without even thinking, I carefully opened it, my fingers trembling. Inside was a folded piece of paper, and as I unfolded it, my heart stopped. It was the will, but not just any will. This was the real will. The one Mark had clearly never shown me. The one he had probably hidden all this time. My parents had left everything to me. Not just the family heirlooms, not just a few keepsakes. The house was mine. Everything was mine. I sat down on the bed, stunned, my heart racing. This had to be some sort of mistake. Maybe it wasn't the final will. But no, it was signed and dated, with both my parents' signatures at the bottom. And it didn't mention Mark at all. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. How could Mark have done this to me? How could he have lied to my face like that? He had tried to push me out of the house, to take everything for himself. All this time, I thought I was at his mercy, but in reality, the power had been in my hands all along. But I couldn't just sit on this information. I needed advice. I needed to make sure I handled this properly. So, without wasting another second, I grabbed my phone and called a lawyer. I'd never dealt with anything like this before, so I wasn't sure where to start. I needed someone who could help me navigate this mess. After a few rings, the line connected. Hello, this is Richard Parks. How can I help you today? I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Hi, I need legal help. I found something important. My parents, well, they passed away a few months ago, and my brother has been taking control of everything. But I just found a will that changes everything. Richard didn't say anything right away. Okay, Sarah, slow down. Let's take this one step at a time. What exactly did you find? I explained everything to him. The will, the fact that it left the house to me, and how Mark had been acting like he owned everything. Richard was quiet for a moment, processing what I had said. You've got something serious here, Sarah. If what you're saying is true, this could change a lot of things. But I need to see that will. If it's legitimate, we can use it to put Mark in his place. My hands shook as I held up the will. I'll bring it to you. But I need to know, what should I do next? Should I confront Mark? That depends, Richard said carefully. Do you want to handle this peacefully, or are you ready for a legal battle? Mark will likely fight you on this, especially if he's been living there and acting like he's in charge. You need to be prepared. I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what I wanted. I didn't want to tear my family apart, but I also couldn't let Mark continue to walk all over me. The anger that had built up over the last few days was bubbling over, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold back. I'm not sure what I want, but I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing, I said, my voice shaking. We'll take it step by step, Sarah. But whatever you decide, you've got the law on your side, and you don't have to back down. As I hung up the phone, I realized something. This wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The battle for the house was far from finished, and I was about to find out just how far Mark would go to keep what he thought was his. The next morning, I sat in the lawyer's office, gripping the will so tightly that my fingers had started to cramp. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning, and Richard Parks, my lawyer, skimmed through the document with an intense focus. His office smelled of old books and fresh paper, and the walls were lined with certificates and law books. Finally, Richard exhaled and looked up. Sarah, this document is clear as day. Your parents left the house entirely to you. Your brother is not mentioned at all. The words sank into me like a weight. Even though I had already read the will myself, hearing it from a legal expert made it feel real. I swallowed. So legally, I own the house. Richard nodded. Yes, Mark has no rightful claim to it. If this is the most recent version, and from what I can see, it is, then he has no case. A sharp contrast to the way Mark had been acting. Ever since our parents passed, he'd waltzed in like a king returning to his castle, dictating what would happen to my home, treating me like an unwanted guest in the very place I grew up. And now? Now, I had proof that the castle was mine. But Mark wasn't just going to accept this. He never did. Richard leaned forward, his voice firm but calm. The next step is confronting him. We need to do this properly. Call him. Tell him to come here. I'll be the one to present the will to him, so there's no debate, no accusations of forgery. Once he sees this, we'll see how he reacts. I hesitated. I could already picture it. Mark's face turning red, his voice rising, his rage at realizing he wasn't the one in control. But this had to happen. I pulled out my phone, my hands only slightly trembling as I scrolled to Mark's number. Press call. 2 rings. Then, what do you want? Mark's voice was impatient, like I was some inconvenience to him. I took a breath. Come to Richard Park's office. Now. It's urgent. There was a pause. Then a scoff. I don't have time for whatever pity party you're throwing. It's about the will, I said, my voice steady. You're going to want to hear this. Silence. I could almost hear him processing those words. Then, finally, fine, he snapped. I'll be there in 20. I hung up without another word. Richard gave me a reassuring nod. Let's see how he takes the truth. 20 minutes later, Mark stormed into the office like he owned the place, shoulders squared, expression set in stone. But he wasn't alone. Lisa, his wife, followed closely behind, her lips twisted in that familiar smirk she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. Lisa crossed her arms. This better be important. I ignored her and turned to Mark. Sit down. Mark raised an eyebrow, then looked over at Richard. His smirk faltered slightly. Who is this? Richard remained calm, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Mr. Dawson, please sit. Mark didn't move right away. He was sizing up the situation, trying to figure out why I had called him here. Eventually, he sat, though his posture was tense. Richard slid the will across the desk. I suggest you read this carefully. Mark snatched the paper up, his eyes skimming over the words at first, then slowing. His grip on the document tightened. His face changed, his usual smugness vanishing. Lisa leaned over his shoulder, frowning. What does it say? Mark didn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. Richard folded his hands on the desk. Your parents left the house to Sarah. She is the sole legal owner. As of now, you have no rightful claim to it. Mark slammed the paper onto the desk. This is bull. He cut himself off, his nostrils flaring. No, this isn't right. They told me I would get everything. Lisa snatched up the will, scanning it quickly before her face twisted in disbelief. This doesn't make any sense. There must be another will, one where Mark gets the house. I cross my arms. Then feel free to find it. But this is the legally binding document. Mark was breathing hard now, his fingers curling into fists. This is fake. Richard stayed perfectly composed. It's not. This was signed and notarized. Your parents' legal representatives would confirm the same. Mark shot up from his chair, knocking it backward. You think you can just steal this from me? His voice was low, dangerous. Lisa was shaking her head furiously. We'll fight this. We'll contest it. Richard sighed. You can certainly try, but I'll warn you, contesting a legally valid will is expensive, time-consuming, and almost never successful. Mark's eyes snapped to me, and for the first time, I saw something underneath his anger. Panic. For months, he had acted like this house was already his. Like I was just some obstacle to get rid of. But now he realized he was the obstacle. His voice dropped to a growl. You think this is over? I met his gaze, unwavering. No, Mark. I think it's just getting started. Mark's face was red with fury, his fist clenched so tightly his knuckles were turning white. Lisa was gripping his arm, whispering something, probably trying to calm him down, or, more likely, strategizing their next move. But no matter how much they schemed, they couldn't change the facts. The house was mine. Still, Mark wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat gracefully. This isn't over, he spat, his voice barely above a growl. Richard remained unfazed. Legally, it is. But if you'd like to spend thousands of dollars trying to contest a valid will, be my guest. I'm confident any judge will side with Sarah. Mark glared at me like I had personally stolen something from him. Like I was the one being unfair. This was supposed to be my house. I exhaled slowly, my patience running on fumes. You keep saying that, Mark, but why? What made you think you were entitled to it? He scoffed. Because I'm the man of the family. Because Mom and Dad told me I would take care of things when they were gone. Because it's what makes sense. I shook my head, more disappointed than anything. No, Mark. What makes sense is that they left the house to the person who actually lived there, who took care of them when they got sick, who didn't show up only when it was convenient. Mark let out a bitter laugh. Oh, come on. You were just their charity case. They didn't want to hurt your feelings. Lisa nodded eagerly. That's right. Maybe they wrote this will before they realized you wouldn't be able to handle a house on your own. I turned to Richard. There's no older will, right? Richard shook his head. None that hold any legal standing. This is the most recent, signed, notarized, and properly filed. Your parents were clear in their wishes. Mark's expression darkened. This is a setup. You must have found some way to trick them into signing it. I laughed, actually laughed. Are you serious? You think I manipulated them into leaving me the house? Unlike you, I never asked them for a single thing. Lisa crossed her arms. Well, what are you going to do now, huh? Kick us out? Throw out your own family? And there it was. The guilt trip. The same tactic they had been using since day one. I didn't flinch. Mark, Lisa, you have 1 week to pack up and leave. Mark's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I nodded. Oh, I'm very serious. I let you walk all over me because I thought that's what family did. We supported each other. But you? You tried to steal from me, humiliate me, and erase me from my own home. I owe you nothing. Lisa scoffed. This is unbelievable. Mark slammed his fists on the desk. You're gonna regret this. Richard, ever the professional, folded his hands. I'd advise you to be careful with your words, Mr. Dawson. Threats don't look good in legal disputes. Mark stormed out, Lisa trailing behind him, still muttering under her breath. I let out a shaky breath. It was over. I had one. Mark and Lisa dragged out the move until the last possible day, but I had the law on my side. With an official eviction notice and a firm deadline, they had no choice but to leave. They didn't go quietly, though. Mark ranted on social media about how I had betrayed my family, painting himself as the victim. Lisa made petty remarks every chance she got. But in the end, it didn't matter. The house was mine, just like my parents wanted. And as I sat in the quiet, in the home I had fought so hard to keep, I finally felt at peace. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole situation. My name's Elias, I'm 29, and I've always been the other child, the one no one noticed unless they needed something. If my younger brother Lucas wanted the last slice of cake, he got it. If he messed up at school, it was just a rough patch. When I aced my college finals, my mom asked if I could stop bragging, and if I ever brought it up, I'd hear the same thing. Why are you always trying to compete? Lucas needs more support than you. I learned to live with it. Not happily, not peacefully, but I adapted. I worked hard, kept my head down, and carved out my own life far away from home. I got a job in tech, moved into a quiet apartment a few cities over, and built something I could call mine. I still visited, sent birthday cards, remembered anniversaries, paid attention to what people liked, but the affection never flowed both ways, especially not from my mother. Lucas was always the center of gravity in our family. He had this charm that everyone seemed to fall for, this way of turning every mistake into a lovable quirk. He blew through jobs, relationships, even once totaled the family car. But every time, my mom brushed it off with a soft smile and a, "He's just figuring things out." I wasn't jealous, not in the way people think. I didn't want his mess of a life. What I wanted was acknowledgement. A moment. A thank you, Elias, that didn't sound like an afterthought or come attached to a request for money. The final crack didn't start with something big. It started with an email. My mom sent out a group message, me, my aunts, cousins, even some extended family I hadn't seen in years, inviting us all to Lucas's birthday dinner. It was going to be a celebration of his growth, she wrote. A chance to honor the man he's becoming. That line made me pause. Lucas was turning 27. He was between jobs again, had moved back home, again, and was still borrowing money from half the people on that email list. But fine. I marked the date, booked the time off, even picked up a card and a thoughtful gift, a framed map of all the cities Lucas said he wanted to visit someday. I showed up on time, dressed decent, gift-wrapped. The dinner was at this fancy little restaurant downtown, one of those spots with mood lighting and absurdly small portions. My mom was already there, holding court at the head of the long table, glowing like it was her birthday. She waved me over with that fake smile she pulls out for company and gave me the standard, "So glad you could make it." No hug, no warmth, just obligation wrapped in civility. Lucas walked in 10 minutes later, flanked by his girlfriend and some friends I didn't recognize. Everyone stood up like royalty had entered the room. The laughter got louder, the compliments started pouring in, and I faded to the background like always. I tried to make small talk with my uncle, but he kept drifting into stories about Lucas's ambitions and potential. My cousin asked if I was still working that coding job, and then immediately pivoted to asking if I could help Lucas build an app idea he had. I excused myself and went to the bar for a moment alone. By the time dinner was served, I had given up on meaningful conversation. I just wanted to eat, hand over the gift, say happy birthday, and go home. But of course, the universe, or maybe my mother, had other plans. When dessert came out, so did the speeches. First, Lucas gave a predictably messy, half-serious thank you speech, peppered with jokes about how he wouldn't have made it here without his amazing support system. He thanked his girlfriend, his friends, and finally his mom, who teared up on cue. No mention of me, not even a glance. Then my mother stood up. She held her glass high and smiled, that tight, theatrical smile she saves for moments she wants to be remembered. "Let's raise a glass," she said, "to the child who actually matters." There was a beat of silence, just a split second, but it was long enough. Long enough for every pair of eyes at the table to flick toward me. The laughter that followed wasn't even subtle. My uncle chuckled. My cousin snorted into her drink. Even Lucas gave that smug, half laugh he always used when someone took a jab at me. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger at first, just the raw sting of humiliation, of being so publicly sidelined by the woman who was supposed to love me without conditions. I didn't say anything at first, just smiled, nodded slowly. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. Nothing fancy, just a plain, sealed letter I'd been holding on to for a while. I stood up, walked around the table, and placed it gently in front of my mom. If tonight's about celebrating the one who matters, I said, voice even but firm, then this must belong to him. The room went quiet, dead quiet. My mother stared at the envelope like it had teeth. She didn't touch it at first, just looked up at me with a faint crease in her brow, trying to read the situation. Lucas looked confused. Everyone else went still, unsure whether this was a joke or a scene. But I didn't move. I just folded my hands in front of me and waited. Eventually, she opened it. And that's where everything started to unravel. She unfolded the letter slowly, like it might explode. Her eyes scanned the page, and I saw the flicker of confusion turn into something darker, tightened jaw, narrowed eyes, the way she always looked when things slipped out of her control. Her fingers trembled just slightly, but she was trying hard to pretend they weren't. Lucas leaned over to peek at it, but she angled it away from him, clutching it like it was private, like it was hers. What is this?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. I stayed standing. "Read it aloud," I said calmly. "Since we're all here to celebrate honesty and family." She didn't. Of course she didn't. My mother's pride is like granite, cold, polished, and nearly impossible to crack. But Lucas was already snatching it from her hands with that careless grin he always wore when he thought the spotlight was about to land on him. "Relax, Mom," he said, laughing a little as he smoothed the paper. "Let's see what Elias got me. Hope it's not another lecture." The room held its breath. He started reading, his voice cheerful at first, like it was another toast. "To the one who matters. Since I've never been given much of a chance to say this out loud, I figured your birthday was as good a time as any." He slowed down, his grin faltering as he read ahead. "I've spent years watching this family bend over backward to make you feel like a king." He stopped, looked up at me. "Is this a joke?" "Keep reading," I said, still standing there, calm on the outside, heart thundering inside my chest. Lucas glanced around, now visibly uncomfortable, but pride got the better of him. He continued, but the tone had shifted. Gone was the casual humor. His voice wavered. "Watching our mother turn every gathering, every conversation, every drop of attention into a mirror for you to admire yourself in. I've watched you fail upward while others cleaned up your messes, and somehow you still got the credit, the praise, the second and third and fourth chances." Now the murmurs started. Chairs creaked. A few people exchanged looks. My aunt shifted in her seat, and my cousin's mouth fell open. I stayed still, letting the silence gather weight. Lucas tried to scoff, tried to throw on that usual smirk, but his voice cracked. "Okay, Elias, what is this?" "That," I said, pointing at the letter, "is my gift to you. And to Mom. And to everyone here who's been part of the lie we've all been telling for years." My mother finally found her voice. "You think this is appropriate? You think humiliating your brother on his birthday is something to be proud of?" My jaw tightened, but I didn't raise my voice. "You humiliated me the moment you raised that glass and said what you said." And everyone here laughed, like I wasn't sitting at the same table. Lucas tossed the letter onto the table like it was garbage. "This is pathetic. Seriously, man, you waited until my birthday to pull this stunt? Grow up." I laughed once, bitterly. "You still don't get it. You never will." There was more in that envelope, of course. That letter was just the beginning. What no one at that table knew, not yet, was that I had spent the last 6 months quietly untangling myself from this family's dysfunction, cutting the cords they didn't even know they had wrapped around me. No more emergency money transfers for Lucas. No more helping my mom file taxes she never thanked me for. No more being the backup plan. And I had something else in that envelope too. Something official. Something legally binding. But that part, I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my closest friend, because I wanted to do it right. I wanted them to see, to feel the shift when the ground started to move under their feet. Tonight was just the prelude, the first strike, and I wanted every word to land. Still standing, I reached into my jacket again and placed a second, smaller envelope on the table, this time directly in front of Lucas. "What now?" he said, arms crossed, his voice rising. "Another speech? You want applause or something?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small next to him. I didn't feel like the second choice or the shadow. "No," I said quietly. "Just accountability." That's when Lucas opened the second envelope. And everything stopped. He blinked at the contents. Read the words. Read them again. Then looked up at me, face pale. My mother snatched it from him and scanned the page. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The second envelope wasn't long. Just a few sentences, printed neatly on legal letterhead. But the weight of it hit like a sledgehammer. Lucas stared at me like I'd just detonated something sacred. My mother, meanwhile, had gone from confused to flushed with rage. Her lips parted, closed, then parted again, like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the right weapon yet. Because what she was holding was a formal letter from my lawyer, confirming that the ownership of our grandfather's cabin, the cabin, the one my mother and Lucas had always treated like their personal vacation home, had been officially transferred to me. The cabin wasn't just a sentimental spot. It was our grandfather's legacy, the only real asset he left behind when he passed 3 years ago. He'd adored that cabin, maintained it until his final days, invited us there every summer. But more than that, he'd loved me, quietly, steadily. Even when my mother brushed off my milestones or treated me like a nuisance, Grandpa Dean had made it clear I was the one he trusted. But of course, no one asked me what happened after the funeral. No one cared that he left behind a handwritten note for me with the keys. No one paid attention when my mother announced, with confident finality, the cabin will go to Lucas eventually. Your grandfather would have wanted it that way. Everyone nodded. I didn't even bother arguing. I just waited. Waited until the paperwork cleared. Waited until the property taxes and transfer documents bore my name. Waited until everything was airtight. And now, I was done waiting. I don't understand. My mom finally managed, her voice tight, like she was forcing civility through clenched teeth. This must be a mistake. The cabin wasn't yours to give. I turned to her slowly. No, but it was Grandpa's to leave. And he gave it to me. He trusted me to handle it properly. And for the last 3 years, I've let you and Lucas use it like it belonged to you. I covered the maintenance, the repairs, the utilities. You know how much I've paid to keep that place standing. She didn't answer, just stared at the letter like it might morph into something different if she blinked enough. Lucas stood up, so suddenly his chair skidded back. So what? You're evicting us. You're going to be that guy now. No, I said simply. I'm ending the lie. Starting today, neither of you has access to the property. I've changed the locks. I've notified the caretaker. And legally, you have no rights to it. So whatever summer plans you were cooking up, cancel them. The restaurant was silent. Even the servers had paused nearby, pretending to rearrange menus while very obviously eavesdropping. I didn't blame them. This is petty, Lucas spat. Unbelievably petty. Just because Mom made a joke. I stared at him. It's not about the joke. It's never been about just one thing. It's years, Lucas. Years of being sidelined, laughed at, ignored. I didn't make a scene tonight, you did. I just handed you the truth. He stepped toward me. You think you're better than us now? You think being some tech guy in the city means you can look down on your own family? No, I said calmly but firmly. I think choosing peace over chaos means I don't have to keep letting people like you walk all over me. My mother looked stunned, maybe even a little afraid. She wasn't used to me speaking like this, not without backing down a second later. She opened her mouth, and I knew what was coming. The guilt trip, the trembling voice, the "we're family" speech that always came when things didn't go her way. So I cut her off. I'm not doing this anymore. I came tonight because I thought, maybe you'd surprise me. Maybe, just once, you'd acknowledge I existed in this family as something other than the fallback plan. Instead, you raised a glass and told everyone I didn't matter. So I made a choice. Lucas let out a bitter laugh. You think this makes you look strong? You look like a bitter little kid. I tilted my head slightly. Maybe. Or maybe I finally stopped playing the role you wrote for me. My mother's voice finally broke through. Quiet. Controlled. We'll talk about this at home. Privately. There's nothing left to talk about, I said. The cabin is mine. The boundaries are set. You're not entitled to my silence anymore. I picked up my coat, tucked my chair in. The letter sat in the center of the table like a dropped match on a dry field. I didn't bother with goodbyes. As I turned to walk away, I heard a fork clatter to the floor. My cousin whispering, "Did you know about this?" A quiet gasp from someone else. A glass tipping over. But the one sound that stuck with me, really stuck, was my mother's voice, low and shaken, asking Lucas, "What have we done?" I didn't wait to hear the answer. I didn't drive straight home after that dinner. I pulled into an empty overlook just outside the city, parked, and sat there watching the lights shimmer across the hills. My phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls. Voicemails. Mostly from Lucas. A few from my mother. None of them got answered. Not yet. I needed time. Not to think. My decision had already been made. But to breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel buried under them. And that silence? It felt like freedom. The next morning, the messages turned from confused to angry. Lucas texted, "You blindsided us." Real classy, man. That letter's a joke. You think a cabin makes you better than your family? Call me back. Now. Then from Mom, "We need to talk about last night. You embarrassed your brother in front of everyone. You've always been so dramatic. Can't we handle this like adults?" Elias, "I'm serious. Don't destroy our family over this." And then finally, "Fine. Do what you want. But don't expect us to come crawling when you realize what you've done." I didn't reply. Instead, I emailed my lawyer to confirm the lock change was complete. He'd hired a property manager on my behalf, someone local to the cabin, to oversee everything moving forward. I'd given clear instructions. No one, especially Lucas or my mother, was to set foot on the property without written permission from me. But I knew my family, and I knew they wouldn't just walk away quietly. 2 days later, I got a call from the caretaker, Jamie. She was blunt and no nonsense, the type of person who didn't sugarcoat. "Hey, Elias," she said. Your brother and a woman claiming to be your mother showed up this morning." I closed my eyes. Let me guess. Try to act like they still own the place. Yup. They had keys, old ones, which don't work anymore, and tried to tell me they were just dropping by to grab a few personal items. I could almost hear Lucas's smug voice in my head, trying to charm his way in. "How'd you handle it?" I asked. "Firm but polite," she said. "Told them the property was under new management, names on the deed is yours, and if they didn't leave, I'd have to call the sheriff." They got loud. Your mom, said you were being vindictive. The guy started yelling about lawyers. I sighed. "Thanks, Jamie. If they show up again, just go ahead and make the call. I'll back you up legally." "Will do. And for what it's worth, I've dealt with a lot of entitled people over the years. You're doing the right thing." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a while. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. This was who they were. My mother had spent years pretending her favoritism was just support, that her neglect of me was letting me be independent. Lucas had built his whole personality around being adored and enabled. Of course, they thought they could ignore a legal document. They'd ignored my boundaries for decades. But this time, there would be consequences. The next time I heard from them, it wasn't through texts. It was a group email. Subject line, "Family should forgive." The body of the email was long, clearly written by my mother, with Lucas probably standing over her shoulder. It was filled with passive-aggressive remarks cloaked in sentimentality. Things like, "We know you're hurting, Elias. This family has made mistakes, but love should come first. You're acting out of bitterness, and you'll regret pushing us away. Lucas deserves support during this tough time, not hostility. We'll forgive you when you're ready to come back to your senses." That last line was the breaking point. They'd forgive me? I didn't reply. Instead, I sent them a copy of the final estate documents, this time with highlighted sections showing that not only was I the sole legal owner of the cabin, but that I had also formally cut off financial support, something I'd never announced out loud before. Yes, for years, I had quietly sent money, covered shortfalls, paid surprise bills when Lucas bounced checks or when Mom's utilities were overdue. No more. I had formally separated myself from their finances. My lawyer helped me file the necessary documents to ensure I could never be held liable for any debts they might attempt to push my way in the future. I closed the shared emergency account, changed my phone number, locked down my social media. I went nuclear, but carefully, legally, and permanently. And then I waited. They went quiet. No more messages. No more calls. For 3 weeks, I didn't hear a word. It was eerie, but also peaceful, until I got a voicemail from my cousin Mel, one of the few family members I still somewhat trusted. "Hey, Elias. I wasn't sure whether to reach out, but things are kind of blowing up. Your mom's trying to guilt the whole family into cutting you off. She told everyone you stole the cabin. That grandpa left it to both of you, which I know is a lie. Lucas is apparently crashing at a friend's place now because your mom's house isn't big enough, and he's blaming you for ruining his summer. It's bad. Just thought you should know. And for the record, I'm on your side." I thanked her. That message was the final nail. The last scrap of guilt I had left? Gone. They had always expected me to be the safety net, the quiet son, the fixer. But the truth is, there's only so long you can keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm before you turn to ash. And I was done burning. That summer, I took 2 weeks off work and drove to the cabin myself. Alone. When I pulled up the long dirt road, something in me shifted. The air was still. The trees whispered gently with the wind. It was the same cabin I'd visited as a kid, same creaky porch, same screen door that whined when you opened it. But it felt different now. Not like a family home. Not like something borrowed or temporarily loaned to me. It felt earned. I stepped inside and lit a fire. Sat on the couch with a book. Drank coffee on the deck the next morning while deer wandered past the clearing. And I didn't think about my mother once. Not out of spite. Just peace. I never replied to her last email. Never called Lucas back. I heard through Mel that they both eventually stopped trying to spin their story after most of the family started ignoring them too. The illusion of Lucas being the golden child didn't hold up once I stopped funding it. It's been almost a year now. The cabin is mine. My life is mine. And the silence I once feared is now my sanctuary. Some people say family is everything. But I've learned that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up for you when you need them. Who sees you. Who chooses you. And for once in my life, I chose me.